Hello, my name's Kingsley Singleton and welcome to this Photoshop and Elements video lesson from Digital Photo, the UK's best-selling photography magazine. A panoramic image is a great way to show off the beauty of the landscape and is guaranteed to be a real attention grabber whether it's in your portfolio or on your wall. And while they were once just the preserve of those with specialist panoramic format cameras, this kind of wide view is now available to all, mainly thanks to so-called panoramic stitching software. All you need to do is record a sequence of overlapping photos and then let Photoshop or Elements do the rest. So long as they're similar enough to start with, the software will have no trouble blending them together into one awesome wide shot. There's plenty of info on how to shoot your panoramic images in this month's magazine, but in parts 1 and 2 of this video tutorial we're going to be looking at how to prepare your images so they'll combine really easily, then how to actually stitch them together and improve the results in Photoshop. And in this case we're going to be using these 9 separate shots, ensuring we not only get a very wide view but also an ultra detailed one. And this is a great clue to how flexible your approach to panoramics and landscape stitches can be. Once you've got the knack of it, you can create them in virtually any shape or orientation you like. In this first part, we're going to look at a quick and easy way to prepare your raw files for a panoramic stitch, improving the shots but also keeping them consistent. And just as when shooting it's important to keep your lens in a consistent position, this consistency of raw conversion is very important too, because you don't want any one shot being much brighter or darker than the one it's supposed to sit next to. Okay, let's see how it's done by first closing down our finished image there, and then I'll also close down all of these converted JPEGs, and we'll start right from the raw. Now here, as you can see, I'm using Adobe Photoshop CS3, but this technique works pretty much the same in virtually any version of Photoshop or Elements. The first thing we're going to do is open up one of the raw files. So it's up to File, down to Open, and if you're practicing with the images provided on this month's CD, you'll first want to open up the one called Pano 1. Just select that and click Open, and then it'll appear in Photoshop's Camera Raw interface. Now the first thing we want to do when we get in here is just make sure that we're seeing the image exactly as it came off the camera. So come over to this little flyout menu here at the side, give that a click, and then choose Camera Raw Defaults. And as I say, that will just give us the shot exactly as it came off the camera. And next up we're going to move through these sliders just as we would do if we were making any kind of typical raw conversion. So first up we'll click and drag the temperature slider up to 5500 degrees just to warm things up a little bit. I'm going to leave the tint slider just where it is and then come down to the exposure slider, just clicking and dragging that up to 0.7 of a stop. Now you'll see when I did that we're getting a little bit of red clipping warning coming in there because we've got our highlights clipping switched on up there in the top right, and generally that'll tell us that perhaps we've been moving the exposure slider up a little bit too much. However, as we move through the sequence of raw files and give them a consistent conversion, you'll see how that boost to the exposure comes into play. What we can also do to deal with this burnout is just click and drag the recovery slider up to +25, and that should deal with it nicely. Next we'll move down to Fill Light, and again it's not really applicable to this part of the panoramic, but because we're trying to keep things consistent you will see it have its benefits a little later. The blacks we're going to push up to 10, then it's on down to the brightness that we're going to set to +60, the contrast we'll leave at +25, and finally I'm just going to move the clarity slider up to 20. The vibrance and the saturation I'm going to leave alone. Now at this stage, if you're using Photoshop Elements, you'll see that you've got fewer tabs up here at the top of the palette, so you can go right ahead and click on Open Image. But because we're in Photoshop and I just want to correct a little bit of chromatic aberration that's marring this particular shot, I'm going to click on the Lens Corrections tab and then just move that red cyan slider down to around about -60, and the blue yellow I'm also going to take down to -21. And that's pretty much it for our raw conversion settings. So now it's time to click on Open Image. And that, after a little bit of thinking time, will load into Photoshop. Now, as I said before, we want to make all of our raw conversions consistent. And there's a really quick and easy way to do this for each of the remaining 8 files. So just come up to File, down to Open, and then what we're going to do is click on Pano 2, then hold down the Shift key and click on Pano 9. That'll select all of those files that we want to open, and once you click Open down there in the palette, you'll see that we can load them all into our camera interface at once. And then, because just as before we want to make sure that all of our raw files are set to the camera raw default, just going to scroll down this list, holding down the Shift key again and clicking on the bottom one, just highlighting them all there, then clicking on the flyout menu here on the right hand side once more and setting camera raw defaults. That'll apply those default settings to all the images that we highlighted. And now with them all highlighted, we can just key in those settings again, and that's 5500. We'll have that plus 0.7 for the exposure, 25 recovery, 25 for fill light, blacks we're just pushing up to 10, the brightness plus 60, contrast at its default setting of plus 25, and the clarity at plus 20. Then once again for Photoshop users, back into the lens corrections tab, and we'll take that red cyan down to minus 60, and the blue yellow down to minus 23, just as we had before. Now those settings will be applied to all of the images that we highlighted, so when we click Open Images at the bottom of the palette, they'll all be loaded into Photoshop. Once again, this could take a little bit of time because it's quite a lot of data that's being processed, but eventually they will all turn up. And here they all are. Panos 1 through to 9, all nice and consistent there. If you can just sort of take a look at the lighting on the church there, you should be able to see that it's virtually identical. Certainly close enough for Photoshop to do its panoramic stitching. So the next thing we need to do is save all of our converted files. And the best way to do this is to save them all into a new folder, all the files that you're going to use for your panoramic stitch. So come back up to File, down to Save As, and within the raw folder that we got our images from, we'll just click on the Create New Folder icon. We'll call that one Converted Pano JPEGs, and then we'll set our format to JPEG and click Save. And when prompted, just set that quality to 10 and hit OK. And then we'll just zip through and do the same for each of our converted raw files. Down to Save As again. That one doesn't seem to have gone into the right folder, so we can just click and drag that in there. Then click on our new Converted Panos JPEG folder. Save this one as Pano 8, of course. Make sure that it's actually in that folder. Click Save, level 10 again, and we're off and running. So I'm just going to save all of my converted raw files into that folder, and I'll join you in a moment. Okay, so here we are with our 9 consistently converted raw files. But before we go ahead and start stitching them together, I'm just going to make a few tweaks to these top 6 here, the ones that contain a fair amount of sky. You see, part of our raw conversion has meant that that sky is looking a little bit bleached out and not quite as dramatic and interesting as it could be. So what we're going to do is just reconvert very, very quickly the raw files for those 6, just dropping the exposure a little to bring back some of that detail. So it's back up to File, down to Open, and then we'll just head back to our original raw file folder, and then we'll pick Pano 1 and Pano 2. I'm just holding down the Control key, by the way, on the keyboard there, just to select them individually. Pano 4 and 5, and Pano 7 and 8. Click Open, and they'll reappear in the camera raw interface. So once again, we're just going to hold down the Shift key just to highlight all of the files here on the left hand side, just holding down the shift key and clicking on that lowest one. And then the only thing that I'm going to change is just click and drag this exposure slider down to round about -1. That's all I'm going to do. Then I'm just going to click on the Open Images button, just as we did before. And all of those sort of secondary conversions, you might want to call them, will soon appear in Photoshop. And here they are. So I'm just going to actually minimize these few of them for a moment, just dropping them down there to the bottom of the screen until we're left with our new conversion of Pano 1. Now, very simply, just going to come up to Select and down to All, and that'll select this whole file. Then I'm going to come up to Select and down to Copy, just to copy all those contents into the system's memory. And then we can close down our second conversion there. Click back in pano1.jpg and it's back up to the edit menu and down to paste. Now our darker conversion drops in, and if I just bring the layers palette up on screen for a moment, I'll just move that history palette out of the way because we won't be needing that. You can see that for our pano1.jpg file we've now got a darker sky layer sitting above that background layer. So what about the consistency that we are after? Surely this is going to wreck everything we were trying to achieve. Well, it won't after we've blended in this layer seamlessly so it fits with the rest of the images. Now the way we're going to do this is simply by using the eraser tool, so just click that in the toolbox. Then I'm going to bring the brush size right up to about 1200 pixels. That should be fine. Make sure that the opacity for now is set to 100%. And then I'm just going to increase the size of our shot here so we can see exactly what's going on. I'll just zoom out a touch as well. And what I'm going to do is simply make sure that layer 1 is selected in the layers palette there, and then just click and drag right across the image like that. Just bringing back those original tones from the first conversion there at the bottom, and then bringing that opacity down to about 30%, just give it another pass, just making sure that that join is really nice and subtle. Now of course you can't do this with a hard edge brush, you'll have to make sure that you're using a nice soft eraser. So within Photoshop, just if you want to reset it up that way, give the downward facing arrow a click, make sure that the hardness is at 0. And if you want a shortcut to doing that, or if you're in Elements, just hold down the Shift key on the keyboard and keep pressing the left square bracket key until you see that edge of the brush up there in the preview get all nice and soft. That's as far as it goes with blending our slightly darker sky in, so I'm just going to come up to Layer and down to Flatten Image, just to collapse that darker sky into the background. And then we're going to resave our Pano 1 conversion, just by coming up to File and down to Save. And then we can just zoom back out a little there, and you'll see that that's blended in really well. So we'll now continue doing it with the rest of our shots. This one, what do we got here? Pano 8. So it's Select and All once again, Edit and Copy. Once again we can close that one down because we don't need it anymore. Pick up on Pano 8, which is over here on the right hand side of our image. Back up to Edit, down to Paste, and then make sure that you reset that opacity up to 100%. And this time, because this particular image is kind of in the second row, it takes in a bit more of the land, we're going to need to do a bit more erasing, but just kind of keeping it fairly consistent to where we did that first erasing, just sort of above the horizon there, and then bringing that opacity back down once more to 30% and just giving it another quick sweep to make sure that blend is nice and natural. Back up to Layer, down to Flatten Image to get rid of our layer 1 there, combining it with the background layer. Then it's File and Save just as before. So that's the way that we're going to improve the sky in each of our separate images that are going to become our panoramic image. But you don't want to see me doing that to each separate individual image, so I'll get on with the darkening of the skies there, and I'll see you in a moment. Right, so here we are with our nicely darkened skies, and that's really going to benefit that part of our panoramic stitch, just giving it a bit more drama, a bit more top edge to the shot. So they're all saved, we're happy with the consistency of the conversions that we've made. Now it's time to start thinking about stitching them together and making a few extra tweaks to really bring the image to life. I'll be showing you how all of that's done in the next video lesson, so please join me then.